All right, let's call to order the special meeting of Tonganoxie USD 464 Board of Education for Monday, October 21st. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Make a motion, approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
I second it.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. All right, we have one agenda tonight, a discussion item, which is kind of moving the superintendent search forward to the next steps. I know that we want to talk about timeline and some other things. Would remind everyone that we are in an open meeting. It's being streamed on YouTube. And with that, I would gladly turn it over to Dr. Hubbard and Dr. Hart.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for the opportunity to be here. We're excited to be here to support you guys through this process. And I think I mentioned this last time, but I think it's one of the biggest jobs you do as a Board of Education of hiring a superintendent. So, and I also know that you guys have had a lot of special meetings over the last several weeks. So thanks for being here once again. We'll try to make it as quick as we can. I tried to get the agenda really. These are the things on the board are exactly what we need to accomplish tonight to get us moving forward really quickly. I'd like to have this posted as early as tomorrow if we get there, so that will be my goal, and we'll go from there. So I want to start with this solidifying the timeline. So Dr. Hart's going to give you an option 1 and option 2, and we talked about this in the RFP. I've adjusted those dates just a little bit, just because we're a week later than where we were, almost 2 weeks. I think the biggest thing that you really need to look at is the very last line of those timelines. I so want to stand over here, but he told me I had to stay back here, so I'm going to. I'm a rule follower, but the last box of that timeline, you'll see the interview dates with a December interview date and a January interview date. So a lot of times, that's a big week for you all, and if you have 4 candidates, we would actually add a 4th line in there or a 4th day in there. So I think the first thing we need to do is determine which timeline that you all want to go with. The steps in the timeline are exactly the same. It's just those big dates. But the big dates for the board are that special meeting November. That special meeting on November 6th in option 1, and then December the 11th in option 2, and then the interview dates in December and January. So I think I would like to start with some discussion around that and see if you all have a strong preference of one over the other.
So you said on option 1, the special meeting on 11/6.
Yes.
And then the interviews either 12/17 or 1/14.
Yes.
Okay.
And then on option 2, that special board meeting would be 12/11, December 11th.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, we had talked about last time just a little bit for you to kind of process and have a conversation with yourself about, traditionally searches start November-ish, run about 8 weeks, about 8 to 10 weeks, and then they usually culminate somewhere in that January timeframe. We did that all along before the legislature changed the law to move the election. Now that election has shifted, there also is some warrants itself at times to be in that January timeframe. You're going to have some experienced candidates within this pool. Does it give a little pause for experienced people to maybe have to commit to their board prior? I don't know if we have great data that says that that pool is going to be significantly different, but at times it is nice to have that Christmas break, that opportunity before I have to tell my existing board. That's just one factor out of many. We currently have 22 openings in the state, which is another factor. Not all those are posted. Some of those are internal transfers, etc. But we have 22 people that have told their board, hey, I'm either retiring or looking for something different. Our average, like I said last time, is 46, so we're already halfway at our average. That's not the way to be at.
I feel like it's early to be 22.
Super early.
So based on your first point, that would be an advantage for the option 2. Your second point would be more of an advantage for option 1, potentially.
And I would say, and I, Dr. Hubbard, you kind of pushed back a little bit, but I'm going to say that the candidate pool in my experience, probably gonna be fairly similar as far as size. Whether you do it right before or you do it right after. I would say typically though, when the more experienced candidates that you attract, they probably gravitate a little bit more toward option two.
Okay. Are there any points in here where, you know, one of my concerns with option two, or any protracted timeline, is that if you bump into any issues, then now all of a sudden, even your option two timeline turns into something that's 3, 4 weeks, 6 weeks later. Are there any points in here where you would feel like there's a risk point to say something could get delayed and we might be better off to pick an earlier timeline? Or do you feel like that, you know, this isn't a construction project, right? We don't have to worry about rain, we don't have to worry about equipment, we're talking about people, but are there points in here that you think are risky that might delay us?
I think the only thing that delays us is a potential weather day, but,
And the challenge is if we're bringing in 3 superintendent candidates and 2 of them got to come on the 17th and the 18th, we have a snow day on the 19th, what do we do?
Yeah.
Well, maybe we're out of school at that point. Now we'll pivot, right? Weather's an issue, but that's
weather's
probably
really the only thing. For the most part, all the searches that I was associated with, I think all of our searches last year went off as on timeline. I extended mine, but it was in May because the pool was just so not what we wanted at that point. But I don't anticipate that with you all. I think your pool will be pretty good.
So you've made some kind of pro and con comments both ways. If you were in our chair, which one would you pick?
I think I would ask the board as a whole, from a schedule standpoint, which works better for the board. I mean, I mentioned to Justin, I did this last Monday night in Hiawatha, and they looked at the schedule, and 2 of them were out of town in the January dates, and they're like, we're not doing that. So it was an automatic. So of those 2 special board meetings, and we can adjust those as much as we need to, but I think you need to look at your calendars. Are there days where you're like, I can't do this? The other thing that we need to really double check, and a lot of this depends on how you do your final interviews, but if they're going to tour buildings, I just need to make sure you're in school all of those days of the interview days. So
And I would assume touring buildings would be preferable.
that's up to you. Well, we're going to talk about that, and it depends if you're going to have your candidates in front of teachers, in front of community groups. I'm sorry, your candidate.
So on option 1, 12-19, we're not in school.
I think that's a teacher,
Teacher work
flex
day.
day, or a P, professional development.
Flex day. It's a flex day, but I
Yeah.
doubt staff will be in the building that day.
Okay, that's what I was thinking.
So now, how firm is 12-17 through the 19th?
None of those are firm. That's what we need to do today is really solidify this.
So even on option 1, it could
Perfect.
be the 16th through the 18th or something. We could move everything up a day.
Yes.
I had a question on option 1, 12-11, you know, are there potentially candidates that you would miss out on because you're not getting up into the, like, Christmas break, or folks that are potentially interested are gonna be interested
I think they're
at
gonna be
least by the
interested in
11th?
Monday. I think they're gonna be interested. The nice thing about completing applications in January 7th, that second option, if I am a sitting superintendent, which most likely you're gonna have those, it gives you that break to get everything, all my paperwork done, make sure everything's uploaded, and so it does provide that break for your applicants to complete their application over a break. But I also think the people that are gonna apply, they're gonna have that done. I really don't know that there's probably pros and cons both directions.
So for the board, on those 2 different dates on the 2 different options, does anybody have any major conflicts that would preclude any?
I'm out of town the 18th and 19th of December.
You're out of town the 18th and 19th. December.
Do we have any basketball, wrestling parents? basketball and swimming.
Yeah, I got basketball.
You cross-referenced your schedule by chance?
Know that that's
That's always a hurdle that we come across. Cause that starts to be that, tournament week and like tournaments are getting into that January timeframe.
I was thinking it got into February, but
Yeah, but the tournament's in January. It is,
Typically, we can pivot those once we get closer to those interview dates. Just probably need to say, hey, do you wanna be after or before at this point?
And no matter what schedule, option 1 or 2, when you get down to the end, those are daytime, right? That's not gonna be evening, when we talk about touring the school building and that sort of thing.
The interview with the board will be evening.
So the board interview would be the last part of the day, but there would be daytime activities those dates though, correct?
Yes, potentially, assuming that's the direction you all want to go. Here, let me show you what those schedules look like.
the basketball
Way-
tournament is the week of January 19th, but I think it's pushed to the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or
The
Wednesday.
Tonganoxie Invitational. you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
Say January 19th.
So if you guys look up here, this is, these are two very different interview schedules that you could, and you could adjust it anyway, these are just examples. But this to your left is an interview with a public announcement, so the board candidate's gonna arrive, or the candidate's gonna arrive here at the board and meet with Audra. She's gonna give the schedule for the day, they're gonna tour all your buildings, they're gonna have lunch with the administrators, they're gonna have potentially a reception for the general public to come in and meet them, and then they're gonna come to you all and do an interview that night. So it's gonna be 10 to 10. And that's assuming you're gonna publicly announce who your 3 finalists are. If you're not gonna publicly announce who your 3 finalists are, then this schedule over here would be what it would look like. So let's talk about announcing versus not announcing. So I would say most probably superintendent positions are announced. The 3 finalists are announced. They go through this schedule on the left. We are starting to see less of that for a variety of reasons. There are pros and cons to both. If you are in a really good place in your community and you feel like the community trusts you to make this decision, I do think you will likely get more candidates if they're not putting themselves out there publicly. Because it's really hard. If I'm a great superintendent in central Kansas and I wanna come here, and I come and I put myself out there, it's all over social media, and I don't get this job, I have to go walk back into my school district and people are like, well, she doesn't wanna be here anymore. And so it hurts superintendent's credibility to be out there when they're not chosen. Obviously, the pros to doing public interviews is you're very transparent. Maybe you're gonna take feedback from all of these people that meet this candidate throughout the day. What else
In
would you
either
add?
case, it would be closed until you had your finalists though.
Yes. That is true. No one will know who the applicants are except for you all.
And some of this, folks, you have to filter through, because I take some of this with a grain of salt, because we had 2 soups in Missouri last year, and they both called, and they were critical of, hey, this wasn't a close search. One was probably pretty legit, and one was wanting to get a raise at his own board table. And so some of this is we gotta try to help you the best we can with how much information they give us. But that's part of the dance here, is some of these folks are looking to, if they're gonna retire and come to Kansas, it's gonna be a significant bump for them, right? And so, I wanna make sure you have that information, so, but those 2, for example, like, I'm not willing to share that with my board, probably because they were looking at several different places. And so that's a thing we have to kind of filter through as well a little bit.
So, I know we're kind of pivoting back and forth
That's okay.
between open and closed and the timeline. Pivoting back to the timeline a little bit, I know Stephanie wouldn't be available the end of December, and I think this is an important thing for all of us to participate in.
I agree.
It also sounds like that the option 2 is a bit more traditional of a timeline and might get us a few more experienced candidates. I think I would be more in favor of option 2. My only concern is, if there were delays, it pushes us out even further, but it sounds like the risk of that is minimal. But I think I'd be more in favor of option 2 based on the facts presented, but any discussion on option 1 versus option 2?
Just a question. Even if we chose option 2, you could still announce, that date could change, right? You would still announce early or no? You could announce early.
Announce the,
Position.
it'll be out this
No
week.
matter what option we go with, it's out there. Okay.
While I have November 3rd, it can go as soon as we have it ready.
Yep, fair enough.
Any other discussion on option 1 versus 2?
My other question is, like, is there a hybrid approach? Like, I mean, I like the idea of like getting the superintendent characteristics committee, like that work kind of done, and like then we could maybe have a little longer search time.
Let's talk about that just a minute. So, the survey, both the survey and the focus groups are really about a voice in this process, from as many people as you want to have a voice. So we recommend, we have this survey that we use. It has 7 questions. I have a hard copy if you want to actually see the questions, but generally speaking, the first 2 questions are around demographics. It asks people to prioritize the personal qualities they want to see in the next superintendent, leadership qualities, what kind of experiences you're going to prioritize. Is it important that they've been a superintendent? Is it important they've been a superintendent in a similar size district or a similar size community? Critical issues for the next superintendent to know that they need to know to be successful. And then the last one is, what is that single quality that's going to separate your next candidate? So this is a survey that we would have the district push to all stakeholders. I always encourage principals to have it in their newsletters, all your social media channels. So anybody can take the survey. You don't have to be a parent. You could be a community member. Anybody can take the survey. So that's one way we get voice.
No open-endedness on this. These are all
Question
choice
6.
or ranking. Yep.
Isn't question 6? I think it's,
I don't think so.
okay.
I could be wrong, but I
Alright.
think it's
So to Evan's point, if we look at option 1, if you were to draw a line above the 12/11 date, realistically, any of those things above that 12/11 date could be done as soon as we could potentially get them done.
Yes.
So there could be a hybrid approach where we pick option 2, but we still fast track the first 4 boxes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yes.
Like, get that stuff.
And it sounds like realistically that's kind of what you would recommend anyway, because stay ahead of the curve.
Sure. And there are candidates that will like to see the results of this survey and the results of the characteristics to determine if they're a good fit. And we want them to do that. I mean,
Oh,
we want this
absolutely.
to be a good fit for both parties. So
Yep.
it's nice to have that.
So I think to Evan's point,
We could keep the November 6th for the characteristics.
so maybe the option would be that we keep the top 4 boxes on option 1 and the bottom 3 boxes on option 2.
Yes?
My only thought is, it seems like the last couple of years, we've had a lot of snow days in December. Is that right?
Typically in January,
January.
February.
January, okay.
We've had
okay.
a couple in December.
I just had it wrong then, so I just was thinking if we had option 1, planned for option 1, we could still fall back on option 2 if we had bad weather, but if, you know.
That's a good
I mean-
insight too, Linda. So, let's say 11/6 would get canceled for characteristics. Maybe we can then pivot to 12/1 or whatever, the
Yeah.
next possible date.
So again, I think Evan's point was very well taken. I think maybe the getting ahead with the first 4 boxes on this timeline, starting those as soon as possible, somewhat aligned to option 1, and then the bottom 3 boxes, somewhat aligned to option 2.
So we'll edit that for sure.
And that would allow Stephanie to be here, because I think it's important for all of us to the greatest extent possible. And again, it sounds like that's a slightly more traditional timeline, and we may get some more experienced candidates that way. I know this isn't an action item or a vote, but any disagreement there?
All right, I'll get you an updated timeline. We'll get that fixed.
And you guys are good with that?
100% yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Then you'd also brought up the topic of a closed versus open.
Yeah, let's come to that in the end. So I think some of this other information will help you with that. I'm gonna back up just a little bit here.
Okay.
Some marketing materials. I have both of these and have collaborated with your communications team. We will finalize these. I'm waiting for just a little bit more information on the school budget, and I'll finalize these. I'll probably use them interchangeably, one with the announcement and then the other with social media. I do have hard copies that I want to leave, even though the budget information's gone, just in case you see something you're like, I would like to maybe see this done differently or something. We can edit those, yeah, sure.
And once we land on this, you'll coordinate, obviously posting the position, but then you'll coordinate with Becky in terms of any communication we want to do.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, and I have been coordinating with her already.
Yep.
And then anything you all post, then we would repost, and I will also be posting social media, so, and I'll tag you guys on that, so we can do kind of a double. And we'll create social media posts off of this information as well. Okay, so the survey again, we'll push it to as many possible people as we can get. We want as much feedback as we can get. Any questions regarding the survey? Again, our number one purpose is to have a voice in the process.
I think the only question I would have, in terms of getting it out there, and I agree with you, we want to get it to as many people as possible. We can use social media, we can use our internal email tools, those kind of things. Do we need to post them around town? How should the board participate in that? It's really, I mean, Becky's great. We can tell Becky, post this on social media, mail it out, email it out, all that stuff, but what other stuff do we need to do that's more grassroots?
So I would lean on Becky for the answer to that, because you likely have other things you do the same way. Do you have a newsletter that goes to the entire community?
Not that's mailed.
Not
no.
that's mailed, okay. So I recently had a smaller community up north that sent it to their churches to ask to send through their newsletters. You could probably do it through the city potentially to ask, or the Recreation Commission could probably also push it for you. But I would talk to Becky about how you're pushing to non-family stakeholders in the community.
Okay. So that'll kind of be an action item for us, as we'll have to figure that out. Okay.
All right, and then the next way to have this voice in the process is focus groups. So we come and spend a day here doing focus groups. We've done as many as 7 in a day. Dr. Hart and I have done 14 in a day. He was at one side, I was at another. It all depends on who you want to have a voice in this process. So these are the 4 questions that we base the process off of. And this is how we come up with this final characteristics report. This next slide shows you just a little bit of how they're organized. We would almost always have one at each building in the district. A lot of people will use their site councils for those so that you have parent representation, certified, classified. At the high school, we might run actually a student focus group if that's something that you wanted to do. Your administrators, we would do a group with them. Community groups are pretty common to have. Usually a focus group will have around 30 in it. We can do a little bit larger than that. It's better conversation with about 30. But that community group can be other people that are really involved in the community that the superintendent works with regularly. And then we come at the end of the night and we share that report with you all. And then from all of that data we have from the survey and all of the focus groups, we will develop the characteristics of the next superintendent based on all of that information.
Think of it as kind of like a funnel. Top of the funnel is really wide. We're trying to get survey data from many people in your community we can touch base. Even if we get a few grandpas that don't live in the community, that's okay. But as wide as we can, all the way to the focus groups where it's a little bit more personable, if you will, glean a little bit more of that, that connection that we have with people versus just on a survey. And then gradually that gets to you. And you start to filter out at the bottom, what are those 6, 7, 8 characteristics that you as a board team, with this input, you value and you think are most important. And then that's exactly like she said, that's how we start to attempt to screen these people.
So quick question, trying to map this to the timeline. So the superintendent characteristics committee is separate from this though? Or no?
No, that's that day. That's the
12/11.
yes. Wherever we landed, November 6th. That would be that day. We would be here the whole day, and then we would meet with you all in the end to finalize that report.
Okay. And so that meeting that you were gonna finalize would include the results of surveys, the results of any committees that we form, the results of these focus groups. That's kind of a culmination of all those results would happen that.
Correct. We would share that with you, and then from that, we would do an activity to get us to those final 6 to 8 characteristics. You are correct.
We don't need to design it tonight, but the rec commission would need to be on here for Tonganoxie, I think, maybe that rec commission board. And we can think through who would be important for that. And honestly, I'd love to get Lauren's opinion on who he thinks would be important for that too, because he interfaces with some of those same people, so.
So something to think about, if you're gonna have that on 11/6, Dr. Hubbard's probably gonna call Audra at the end of the week or the first of next week, and they're gonna work backwards through that schedule. So if you tell us that the board meeting's at 7, then we will work backwards from 7. So let's say the last group is 5:30, and the 5:30 would be parents, for example, community members, and then we would just work gradually an hour back. Maybe we start at 8 a.m., 7 a.m. But those are gonna have to be, if we keep it at the 6, gonna have to be notified here fairly quick, because we're at the end of October. So like, we're helping Mission Valley, or I am, and we're gonna send that out next Wednesday. It's probably your dead drop date. And so just a thought there to think about how you wanna do that.
So I have 6 groups listed there. If we add the commission for a 7th group, did we miss any groups?
And I'm not so sure you couldn't put the rec commission in the community group.
Yeah, I agree.
But I don't know that it needs to be
Okay.
so are there 5 or 7 members of that board?
There's 5.
So,
Perfect. So we can just invite all of them to that
So
particular
I would
meeting.
invite them and the director of the rec commission
Okay.
to that community group board.
Where would you put, say, police, fire, your emergency folks? We work pretty closely.
In that community group?
with our community.
Mhm.
And then like site councils would be another potential, right?
Typically, I would have the site councils come in that at the building level.
Okay.
It's just sort of natural. They know the people in the room. Like the elementary site council would come to the elementary meeting, and so on.
Is that the way ours is organized though, or is ours more of a district site council?
We have both.
We have both.
We have building site councils and the district site council.
Okay. So you could even invite the district site council, I think, to the community group and it would be fine.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, I think your list is pretty comprehensive. I think the other community voices, there may be some business leaders or some folks like that that we'd think about, but I mean, I can't think of any significant groups that would be excluded with that list.
But Lauren would be a good one to bounce it
I
off of.
totally agree.
So Tanya, could you and Lauren work with Audra to come up with that community? Well, really all of the groups for us. And then I'll work on a schedule and get back with you two by the end of the week.
Okay.
And the only other thing you probably need to decide is when do you want to start the board meeting? Because then you can work backwards.
Yes, do you always start at 6?
We typically start at 6, but, I mean, this is important if we think we get better community involvement, if we start that at 6, I'm okay starting the board meeting at 7 or whenever. I mean, probably rather not do 10 o'clock, but,
And we need about I need about an hour between the last group and the board meeting to
Kinda.
compile and get it all ready for you all, so 7 would probably work and do the community meeting from 5 to 6.
okay, so a special board meeting on 11/6 at 7 p.m.
And can I ask too, you may have said this, but what's our role in the focus groups, or are we're not?
You're not there,
Okay.
so, and I think mostly because I think people are more free to speak and
Sure.
feel like, and then we'll bring the report to you all.
Okay.
And I work really hard not to identify people, because I want them to be able to say what they want to say.
Mhm.
And sometimes they're really free, and sometimes they're a little more, it just depends on the group, every group is a little bit different,
Okay.
so.
Yeah, that's too much. Right.
I do think, as we look at that, you know, I don't see any reason to break up any of the ones except for the community group. If as we look at that list, we end up with too big of a, 100 people, I don't think we will, but you could even split that up and do a 4 o'clock and a 5 o'clock, and people could pick which one they could come to or something if we think it's getting too onerous.
Yes, we could definitely do that, we'll have time.
Okay.
They're about 45 minutes, so we can run quite a few throughout the day.
I'd also consider like administrators and another one, possibly just district office staff. Again, I don't know how many people we have in that group, but that might sometimes principals like to kind of voice theirs without their district office people in it. That's something else to consider there, but you let us know what works best for you and we'll accommodate.
Okay. All right.
All right,
You got homework
moving
there?
along. So really, this is our last piece in regards to the process of interviews and your finalist. Does anybody have any really strong thoughts they want to start with?
I mean, my opinion is you guys do this every day, we don't. So, we're glad to invest the time that's appropriate and that most closely matches what other successful districts do. If this is the right timeline, I don't have a strong opinion on it. I mean, this is important, and I think spending the day in our community is an important part of it, but I think I would defer to what you've seen work.
I've honestly seen both of them work very well. It really just sort of depends. What does teacher voice look like in Tonganoxie? Is there a lot? I mean, they have a lot of opportunities to voice, and
Teacher voice is very important. It's very important to them, it's very important to us.
then I would make it public. I mean, if that's important, you don't want to violate that. And I feel like if you, I don't know, Stephanie, as a teacher, what would you say?
I can kind of see it both ways. I feel like if I was part of a survey beforehand, that I would feel like I probably actually got my voice out more than if I got to meet the person. So I don't, because I'm not going to be able to make that final decision if I was a teacher looking at that. So I would actually rather be part of it up front, so I could get what I, thought out before they even started interviewing people. So I can kind of see what you're saying about the confidential interviews. I'm sure that's true that during that time period there are a lot of probably very experienced superintendents that would rather not have their districts, because they do have to go back and face those districts if they don't get the job.
Right.
So,
Yeah, it's such a hard thing, because if we get the right applicant that might not have otherwise applied, you kind of have this hero or zero moment of, you get that perfect applicant that might not have otherwise applied, and it works out, and he or she's here for a decade and does great things, you'd be really glad you had the confidential process. But I think this board has a pretty good relationship with the community, and I would hate to sour that too.
Linda, do you have some perspective on the teacher piece?
I can say that, as a 30-year veteran teacher, I've gone through about 11 superintendents, and sometimes we didn't know anything until the last minute who was going to be there. And I appreciated knowing. I appreciated being asked my opinion, but I can also see the confidentiality issue, because there's no real system of checks to keep the confidentiality there. But yeah, I think that teachers would really appreciate being a part of the process.
at what point do you think? Before or both?
I think before.
Well, and
Well,
I think,
both, yeah.
and I think in either process, we're committed to having everybody have a voice before. I mean, to me, that's not in question. Everybody gets a voice before. But Ryan, what do you think?
I'm torn. Because I do think we're a better potential candidate if we are closed. But
I think the other option, or the other thing that part of this is transparency. Even in an option where we decided to have a closed search, you can be very transparent about why you had a closed search. We can say, look, it's not that we're trying to keep secrets. We're just trying to get the very best potential candidate for Tonganoxie. So in order to do that, some of those really good candidates don't want to put their name out there if they think there's a, less than 100% chance that they're going to get the job. So I think even in a closed search, our communication plan can be pretty transparent about why it's a closed search. So that's something to keep in mind too. I'm really not advocating for either necessarily, because I think they both have merit, but I think you can be transparent even in a closed search about why you had a closed search.
I think if you're going to go the closed search route, you have to be very good at communicating the why. And then I think it'll take care of itself. And we haven't really talked about this, and I don't really want to talk about it out loud because I think it could somewhat come into executive session. But if you have internal candidates, this is another place that they would also be protected, in that if they weren't to get the job, then they could still go back to their building and be a principal without everyone, they didn't get the job. So there's that piece too. And I don't know if you'll have internal candidates, but if you do, that's another piece to consider.
I do have a quick question about the closed. So the superintendent, if it was closed, or potential superintendent, would not tour any of the buildings. They wouldn't meet with anyone.
They would
Are
not.
they ever concerned about that? Because I think when you apply for a job, it's kind of a two-way street. You're not only we're looking for somebody, but they're also looking for a good fit. So does that ever throw anything off?
So in all the ones that I have been part of that were closed, with the exception of one, they knew something about the district. One of them went to school there 20 years ago probably, but went to school there. two that were hired locally were internal candidates. The most recent is the Blue Valley search. They gave no information, and she was not from Blue Valley. So, can you speak to any others?
I wonder, Dr. Hubbard and I always kind of talk about this. We talk
debate
about
it.
our craft, right? Because it's all about trying to prepare you to identify the best person. When I think about, and I don't want to bias your judgment, but if I'm thinking of a district that has,
We want you to
Yeah.
inform our judgment.
I want this to come out objective, then you can use it. But if I had a district that had 5 or 6 different elementaries, it is hard to include all those elementaries at an equitable level where everybody feels like, hey, we got to spend some time with the person. We got to give input. When you have more of a one campus or a one kind of town feel, we had coffee down there at 3 Sisters.
We did.
Kids were great. You could tell they're high school kids. Hey, thanks for coming in. We didn't tell them that we were coming to help hire their new superintendent, but that to me feels more like when you have one elementary, one middle, one high, that personability feels much different. Not that they didn't do a great job at Blue Valley, because that person comes back after the interview process is done and they do all that stuff. But it's just different. It's a little bit different on scale. Again, I think not to put it on you, but essentially the intimacy that you have with your teachers, your staff, your buildings. And that's what I would tell you to lean your decision on, is that relationship you currently have that you value. And that to me is the decision factor that will help you make that decision properly.
I think the other thing to think about is, I don't think there's anyone here that doubts the importance of getting the opinions of all those folks, but that upfront opinion is really going to inform more about who those final 3 candidates even are than meeting those final 3 candidates, a few weeks before the hire. So, I think if there was ever objection to a closed search, and again, we haven't made that decision, I think that even in a closed search, you're still asking for all those same opinions. You're asking about what's important. Yes, you may not get to meet him or her before they're, hired, but all the same input was still received.
One other thought too, and this may not be possible and open up a whole can, but if we did a closed search, could we also expand that interview group to include a teacher or 2 as part of that? So understand the importance of teacher input and everything. I didn't know if that would be a way to kind of do both.
We really recommend that this is board's hire. It's the one person that you hire. However, one thing that if you're going to do that teacher part, we have used a teacher feedback form so that the teachers could fill out that feedback form. Is there one in there?
Yeah.
As they are they personable? Did they, those types of things?
Page 33.
Yeah, if you want to look in your books, if you have them. And so they would be able to give that feedback. We would have the board clerk tally that feedback and give it to you, so that after the interview that night, when you're talking about the candidate, you could see the feedback from the teachers at that point. So there is that piece.
I think my only, and Evan, I don't think the idea is a bad one. My only concern with that is you guys are going to be asked directly by candidates, is this a closed search or an open search?
We will.
And I think if you can be fairly binary with that answer and say it's either open or it's closed, you probably get the benefits of some of those candidates that might not have otherwise applied. And one of the things that I would fear about with kind of a hybrid approach there would be, we're going to put Dr. Hubbard in a position where she's got to say, well, it's kind of a closed search, but they're going to include some teachers, and then all of a sudden it becomes well, is it really a closed search? Did we get that extra candidate that we really wanted? Because,
One thing that
keeping secrets is going to be hard.
Yeah.
we do have, we did a search this past year where the teachers union, there were 2 representatives of the teacher union that did participate in the entire process in all of executive session meetings, but we had them sign a confidentiality agreement, I think's what it was called, almost like a contract saying, as they went into executive session, they signed a contract saying they wouldn't
Talk to anybody.
talk.
So they're not bound by coma like you were. That's
I mean, that would be the exception. And again, you all can invite anyone in executive session you want to invite in. I mean, that is an option, but this, I mean, it is the one thing that you do as a board. It is the one person that you truly interview and hire and make the decision. So we typically recommend the board make that decision. Obviously with feedback.
So, this is obviously a difficult decision and certainly one that isn't to be taken lightly, but we probably do need to put it to bed. I think that we could manage the politics around a closed search. I think if we were exceedingly diligent around soliciting feedback before, I think if we were highly communicative during the process about, why it's a closed search, and that wasn't a decision we took lightly, but here's the why, I think we could manage the politics around that. And I'm not, manage is a verb. It won't just happen. We'll have to be active in that. But I think it feels like to me that there could be some really rock star candidates out there that aren't willing to go rock the boat with their current bosses.
I think as long as people are given the opportunity to say what kind of characteristics they want and what kind of, certain special things that we're looking for, they're going to understand that it needs to be a closed search, and they'll, they know that basically the buck stops here, so we have to it has to be our decision, and they'll understand that.
And I mean, again, I think the response to someone that says, why would you do that? I mean, are you going to go tell your current boss that you're looking for a job before you have another job? You probably would rather not most of the time.
There's very few cases where you get to interview your supervisor.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not something you want to, obviously throw back in people's face, but very rarely do I get to say, I get to spend time, almost kind of interview, participate in hiring my boss. That just typically doesn't happen. Now, we do this because our communities value, the relationship they have. They value the communication, they value the transparency. But for totally different reasons, you do it this way. And so,
Again, if you're going the confidential route, the communication is the most important part. And that communication about, here's your opportunity for your voice, both in this survey and focus groups. And if that means we need to do more focus groups to offset that, like maybe 2 at the high school just because of the size of the building and the number of employees, or it could be all 3, then we'll make that happen. But I think just making sure people understand that's where their voice is.
So, help me understand. With the hybrid approach, you're late enough, those folks are probably realistically, they're looking for a job anyway, they're leaving. Probably. Or they're just dragging
Only if
their
it's
feet.
the right job,
Maybe.
yes.
So then when we identify 3 candidates, 4, whatever, good, better, best, our heart and soul in the guy we want may not be a fit, may not even accept the job, right? It's a possibility.
It's always a possibility. I will tell you, I work really hard with candidates.
To not be in that situation.
To not be in that situation. And as a matter of fact, when we go to set up a final interview, I ask the question, if you were offered this job after the interview, can you accept it? Or would you accept it? Do you do that? And I tell people all the time, don't apply for jobs you're not willing to take.
And you mentioned that the last meeting.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean they don't get an interview and something's off, right? Or whatever, something crazy
Okay.
happens. But rarely does, I haven't seen someone not take a job. Have you? I'm sure you have. You've done a lot more.
Anything's possible, right?
Yeah.
So, but try to prevent those things.
But yes, it is possible that your number one says not doing it.
Right.
But I think, so, I'll go on the record. I think my opinion would be we can manage communication. We can manage through the public perception of a confidential search. We cannot manage the diamond in the rough candidate or the candidate that we really wish we had that never applied because they
Afraid or scared.
they didn't want to have to go tell their board. So, you know, if you think about the things that you can control, I think that we can control the communication. We can't control that candidate that I sure wish would have applied, but they didn't for whatever reason. So I think my opinion would be that the confidential process has some pretty good benefit, but again, everybody needs to be comfortable with that. Or the other way, and I can get on board the other way too. Anybody have a strong opinion? Tanya, what do you think?
I don't get a vote. I'm good with whatever, honestly. I can see pros and cons with both.
Yep. I think my opinion would be that let's control the things we can control, and we can control communication and public perception around confidential, but I can't control the candidate that doesn't apply, and I wish they would.
And I would agree with that. I think we're serving to identify the best possible candidate we can get, and I don't want to derail that. The what ifs, going back to their board.
I could see an argument that we would get stronger candidates if they, like if a good superintendent in good standing in their district doesn't really have plans to leave, but maybe this is a good opportunity, I think would only come if it was a closed search. So I can see that.
I
I
agree
don't know
with
if
that
it would
also.
only come, but I think the
Well, yeah,
likelihood
that's, yeah.
would be higher if they, I mean, you're eliminating a lot of risk for a really good candidate, because when we do our job and maintain the confidentiality, they've got, other than a couple of days of their time, they're not out much. So,
When I've been on the teacher side of the open interview, it truly doesn't mean a lot to meet them from the teacher point of view, from my point of view, I guess, as a teacher, because I didn't get to make a choice on any of them. It was just, I just happened to get to meet them. So I think a confidential one is better in the respects of all the things that we've talked about, but also I think a lot of people are gonna understand that they would rather give their input up front, so that may direct the candidates that we actually have, because they're typically not going to get to pick the final candidate. So.
all right, do we have consensus on confidential?
Good with it?
Okay, so that just leaves us to questions for us.
Take a couple minute break here. I need to.
Can we take a 5-minute bio break and think about our questions?
Yes,
You
for
mind?
sure.
Sorry.
I don't want to lose Chris here, so.
I'm a flight risk anyway.
I guess I'll
be out there, right?
Yes.
We can have it to you tomorrow.
I actually created it today, so it's actually ready to
Yeah.
go for the most part. Yeah.
All right, so we've got a couple of homework assignments, so we're all gonna work with Becky on a comms plan for the survey, how we're gonna get it out there. We'll work on a final list for the community, the focus groups, especially the community group, who else might need to be included in that, we'll get Lauren's opinion. We'll have a special board meeting on the 6th at 7 p.m., so it's just over 2 weeks away. You guys will revise a timeline for us with the dates that we talked about tonight?
Yes, I'll send it to Audra tomorrow.
Okay.
I would also, on the communication plan, I would work with Becky, and I'll do this to have a landing page around the superintendent search on the website. I think that's important with the timeline, the dates. Because then people will be like, oh, I don't know anything about the search. You go, well, there is a webpage, and you can route them there.
Do you have kind of a time frame for when you do the forums? Like approximate
Yes, so
times?
I'll give you a book before I brought some extras. There are some samples in there,
Oh, okay,
but I also have some other samples we can
okay.
work on, but there are some samples in here.
Hour at a time, 1 hour blocks, work backwards from the board.
Okay, got it.
And I need an hour before after the last one and before the board meeting.
See a sample on 21, if you just jot that down.
Anything else that you guys can think of? What about the actual job description that gets posted? Is that,
On our site. So the job, yes, I can route you to that.
okay,
When I send the timeline, I'll put a link to the,
and the job description,
board.
obviously, we're gonna get to some characteristics that will help us narrow it down.
mhm.
But at this point, what you're gonna post is a fairly generic job description, Tonganoxie Schools Superintendent.
So it's in AppleTrack. Do you all use Frontline here? So it's the same system that you're using, Frontline, and you would click on it, and that flyer, the 2 flyers that we gave you, one of those would be there, so the flyer will be there. And then other than that, there's not much description there other than what the job is and your demographics. I will push on social media some information, but a true job description, we can upload do you have a job description?
I don't know.
I'm sure you do. Your job description, if you want to post that with the flyer, we can do that as well. But I would want to look at it and make sure that it's what you want it to be. Because oftentimes they're not updated.
And I'm not even sure, obviously the process is going to lead us to characteristics that will help us narrow down, but, anybody that's qualified for the job knows what a superintendent is. I don't necessarily
One
need to tell
question
you.
that
But does the salary impact that?
we're going to talk about the salary at that characteristics meeting. I'm going to bring in some comps to share with you all, and we're going to have a pretty solid range when we leave that meeting. Where was I? I was getting ready to say something else. Sorry. One thing that I will get asked, we will get asked about residency. Oftentimes, you'll have a policy around residency, or it'll be in the job description. Does anyone know if that's there?
I don't think we do.
But it might be a characteristic that's really important, that you live in the community.
Some people throw it into the contract too, about, hey, within 18 months you will live within.
I feel like it was in our.
I feel like, I think
I
it
think-
was at one point,
yeah.
it was a big issue a few years back, but
It may have been in the search. I don't know that we have it in the job description specifically.
I won't speak, everybody else can speak up, but living in the community would be very important to me.
I think it almost always surfaces in that characteristics report. If it's not written though, we probably want to consider having either a policy or in the contract, one of those 2 places. Or the job description would cover it as well.
And I think again, one opinion, if there was a really great candidate in all ways that lived in DeSoto and had, he or she had a, senior in high school and wanted to finish the year, I think that feels very different than, hey, I want to live north of the river for the entire time that I work
Right.
for Tonganoxie. So the policy concerns me a little bit because I think there could be some gray area that would not be out of the question. But I think being in the community is pretty important to me.
And the contract can address that. I actually have some language about an 18-month window that was given just recently that I helped a superintendent and board with.
Okay.
If it's important to you as a board team, I would include it in the contract.
I would too.
Not just, hey, we're gonna look forward to being neighbors.
Right.
No, and being in the contract, I totally get the board policy thing concerns me a little bit because it'd be nice to have some wiggle room if there was a really good candidate that could relocate within X number of months. I'd hate to be bound unnaturally there, but I agree it should be in the contract.
Well, and sometimes housing is an issue.
Oh, sure.
I mean, I've got to sell one and buy one and find one.
Yep.
It's a little bit easier now. A year ago, it was really difficult for
Yep.
people trying to do that.
Okay. Other questions, comments?
And when we're, as a board, gonna have an opportunity to look through candidates,
Yes.
applications. I know it's not our role to sit and micromanage through this. We're counting on you guys. But you're not gonna bring us your top four and me not have an opportunity to see the other candidates, right?
So when we come in, we're going to have all of the candidates, and we start with what we call a flyover. So let's say we have 12. We're going to go through each one of them, and we're going to tell you how we're ranking them, green, yellow, or red, and we're going to tell you why we've done that. And then we are going to give you a recommended who we recommend that
For
you
a short
interview.
list.
Yes, but that doesn't mean that you couldn't say, tell me more about this candidate and why you don't have them there. And we can talk through all of that. You can look at their application. Yes, you can look at their references, all of those things.
And prior to that, there will be a background check that's done and all of that
So we always run a background check on anybody that we're recommending. If there's someone that comes from the non-recommended list, we would need to run that background check, which we absolutely would do. We also will do a social media scrub on anyone that we bring as a finalist, or on the short list, as Chris put it. Yes.
So if you have somebody out of state, does that take a little longer to navigate through?
It is harder now.
But it's not impossible.
It's not impossible. We do have some great relationships with our neighbors. Just like they call us for Kansas candidates, we call them. We'll call the Oklahoma director, we'll call the Nebraska director in our light positions and just say, what do you know? Education's a really large world, but it also becomes a really small one, and people know teachers everywhere, right? It's the same with principals and superintendents, administrators. So, and then the USA Kansas is the principal organization. They also have counterparts that they can make phone calls for. Background check, we would do the federal, and we would do it in every state that they have.
You know, if they're a neighboring district, kind of to Ryan's question last week, we're reciprocating a lot of that most of the time, similar to what we do with boards. So if I tell Sherry in Nebraska, hey, Justin's a great candidate, and Justin ends up not being a great candidate, that trust is violated. So we depend on that. And more important, not just Sherry, but hey, do you have a relationship with that board? Can we call them? Who would I talk to? Or maybe, somebody within the district. And so we depend on those relationships. There's about 35 districts that are part of what we call that NAS that we referenced last week. 2 weeks ago now, National Association of Superintendent Searchers. Some of the big players like California, East Coast, when they're on the outskirts, they don't always come to those things. They have such a big entity, they don't need small brothers, small sister, so to speak, but 35 is a pretty good chunk, and typically that's served us really well.
And we meet monthly on a Zoom call with those searchers. And so we have a relationship and feel like we can ask the hard questions.
This is kind of jumping ahead, but if, say, we chose somebody that was from Missouri, they would have to have certification, I'm assuming, with Kansas, and if they don't, how long is that process usually? And is that something that you obviously would put in the contract, that they have a certain amount of time to obtain that, or how does that work?
Yes, and some of them are reciprocating, so it's really easy. It depends on where they're coming from, what their credentials are. Kansas works really nicely with some states and not nicely with others, and so we would really look at that. But prior, and we may handle this a little bit differently, but my out-of-state candidates that I had last year, I made a personal phone call to them and said, have you applied? We can also look to see if they've applied in Kansas, which I will do that too. But if I can't find them, I'll call them and say, why haven't you applied, or what's that look like? Almost always they've talked to the Kansas State Department of Ed, and they at least know what the process is. Most of the time they'll start that process so they can say, my file's been submitted. You have other experiences?
I can't think of what Scott's last name is, but he's the head of licensure in Kansas, and so especially if we have a shorter timeline, I'll say, hey, I have Chris coming from Nebraska, can I send you his transcript? And if he's already a licensed soup, probably no problem. If Stephanie might be coming from, let's say, Idaho, maybe you're going from principal to soup, that's probably going to be really questionable. But if they have a current superintendent license, that's a really quick check with Scott at licensure to say, yep, Chris has what he needs, it'll just take this 6-week period to get the certification, no problem.
The only exception I've seen to that is Texas has kind of an interesting licensure program where they don't have to do it through a university. And so this past year we had, I think, 2 separate, I can think of one literally right off the top of my head, but I think there were 2 that had applied for jobs in Kansas, and they weren't going to be able to be certified in Kansas because they hadn't gone through a certified university to get certified. But yes, we check all of that.
Okay.
So you started the meeting with there's
2
positions open as we sit here tonight. Is that right?
There are 22 positions that the superintendent and the board has notified each other that we're going to have an opening. Not all of them are posted, but we've been notified of 22
Okay.
that are going to have some level of
So,
transition. And they're all,
Whether it's retirement or whatever, that's 22 hopefuls for us. Maybe.
some of those would be, yes.
Or retirement
Some
or
of those
whatever.
are going to be retirements.
I'm just saying.
Yes.
Some of those would probably are looking to, do.
Because like you guys said, this is a network. It's a pretty tight network. I was trying to get it in my head. I was just thinking about
However,
it.
if they've already said that they're not returning, it's probably because the situation, I'm guessing, isn't ideal for them,
Could be money.
Or
or
retirement.
retirement.
Yeah, a lot of our students do a nice job, just like Lauren did, to notify their board ahead of time, so they have ample time to do what they're doing, or what you're doing.
You will see Missouri retirement is, they can retire so early, like at 50 in many cases on the Missouri side. And we see a lot of Missouri retirees that want to come to Kansas, and vice versa. We have a lot of Kansas retirees that jump to the Missouri side. I anticipate we'll have at least 1 or 2 of that situation.
Okay. Other questions? All right, well, I think we've got our respective to-do lists. I certainly think I can speak on behalf of the board and thank you guys for coming out tonight and for your help. We need it. And if there's anything we forgot, let us know and we'll round it up.
And I would say the same to you all. We're here to help you and support you through this process. And there's always questions that come up. Please feel free to text me, call me, email me. I will answer. I will. There are no dumb questions. There really aren't. So please don't. If you're thinking about it, call me or call Justin. Whatever your protocol is, but we are here to help you, and I don't want you lingering on something if you have a question.
Okay. Any other questions?
Just my one thing is, so I'm fixated on this survey and getting it out and be sure people have enough time. Do we need to talk through a strategy for how, I mean, I think it's gonna be easy to post district-wide, but if we're going external to the district, like, do we need to get it in the paper soon, or do we, like?
Yeah, I think we do need a strategy. I will reach out to Becky first thing in the morning and have her put together a straw man for what she thinks the right approach is to get it out there, and we can circulate it to the board. But again, I don't think there's any reason, you know, the things we can move really fast on are probably our internal email system and social media, and I don't see any reason we wouldn't start on those
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Right, yeah.
Maybe not.
Well, I would think all parents could also be communicated with through Skyward as well.
Hmm.
Yeah.
You would have all of those.
Yep.
I think
And
these are all-
oftentimes through your student management system, you'll have secondary family members that it can go to them too. So if you shoot it to everybody, and you could encourage parents to share it with grandparents or neighbors or the little 4-year-old next door's mom.
Yep. So I think we need to move pretty quickly. I'll reach out to Becky first thing in the morning.
Okay.
And we'll get that link or QR code or whatever from
Yep,
you.
I'll get it all to you tomorrow.
Okay. Other questions?
What, do you use Parent Square, or you communicate via Skyward?
We have,
Thrill Share?
School.
School Status Connect.
School Status Connect.
Okay. So it'll be pretty easy to push.
Yep. I think the communication talk track starts then. I don't think we necessarily need to say it's a confidential search at that point, but I think we do need to say, you know, it's really valuable to the district and the board to get everybody's opinion, you know. We're actively soliciting participation because we want it, it's important. It's not a check the box exercise. And so I think when we talk to Becky in the morning, we need to get her crafting that messaging too, and we can take a look at it. So,
Sounds good.
all right,
Thank you.
we're adjourned. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.